day 1 of reading until I end illiteracy. Okay, I'm reading The Art of Seduction. Okay, starting on page 22. Wow, this one has some big words, so this will be fun. Page 22. Introduced to the nuncio by their husbands, these duchesses and marchionesses would find themselves entertaining this strange-looking man, and when he was alone with them, his manner would suddenly change. Within minutes, these ladies would be spellbound. I forget who we're talking about. Gabrielle D'Annunzio. Okay. So he's an Uggo. Within minutes, these ladies would be spellbound. First, he had the most magnificent voice they had ever heard, soft and low, each syllable articulated with a flowing rhythm and inflection that was almost musical. One woman compared it to the ringing of church bells in the distance. Others said his voice had a hypnotic effect. The words that voice spoke were interesting as well. Alliterative phrases, charming locutions, poetic images, and a way of offering praise that could melt a woman's heart. D'Annunzio had mastered the art of flattery. He seemed to know each woman's weakness, one he would call a goddess of nature, another an incomparable artist in the making, another a romantic figure out of a novel. A woman's heart would flutter as he described the effect she had on him. Everything was suggestive, hinting at sex or romance. That night, she would ponder his words, recalling little in particular that he had said, because he never said anything concrete, but rather the feeling it had given her. The next day she would receive from him a poem that seemed to have been written specifically for her. In fact, he wrote dozens of very similar poems, slightly tailoring each one for its intended victim. A few years later, D'Annunzio began work as a society reporter. He married the daughter of the Duke and the Duchess of Galicia. Shortly thereafter, with the unshakable support of society ladies, he began publishing novels and books of poetry. The number of his conquests was remarkable, and also the quality. Not only marchionesses, I don't know what that is. Is that like a medieval term for bitches? The marchionesses would fall at his feet, but great artists such as the actress Eleanor Duse, who helped him become a respected dramatist and literary celebrity. The dancer Isadora Duncan, another who eventually fell under his spell, explained his magic. Perhaps the most remarkable lover of our time is Gabrielle D'Annunzio, and this notwithstanding that he is small, bald, and except when his face lights up with enthusiasm, ugly, evil. But when he speaks to a woman he likes, his face is transfigured so that he suddenly becomes Apollo. His effect on women is remarkable. The lady he is talking to suddenly feels that her very soul and being are lifted. At the outbreak of World War I, the 52-year-old D'Annunzio joined the army, although he had no military experience. He had a flair for the dramatic and a burning desire to prove his bravery. He learned to fly and led dangerous but highly effective missions. By the end of the war, he was Italy's most decorated hero. His exploits made him a beloved national figure, and after the war, important email. Okay, keep going. Where was I, sister? Okay. Alright, his exploits made him a beloved national figure, and after the war, crowds would gather outside his hotel. Wherever in Italy he went, he would address them from a balcony, discussing politics, railing against the current Italian government, giving like Justin Bieber but ugly and short and bald. Railing against the current Italian government. A witness of one of those speeches, the American writer Walter Starkey was initially disappointed at the appearance of the famous D'Annunzio on a balcony in Venice. He was short and looked grotesque. Little by little, however, I began to sink under the fascination of the voice, which penetrated into my consciousness. Some quotes. Never a hurried, jerky gesture. He played upon the emotions of the crowd as a supreme violinist does upon a Stradivarius. The eyes of the thousands were fixed upon him as though hypnotized by his power. Once again, it was the sound of the voice and the poetic connotations of the words that seduced the masses. Arguing that modern Italy should reclaim the greatness of the Roman Empire, D'Annunzio would craft slogans for the audience to repeat or would ask emotionally loaded questions for them to answer. He flattered the crowd, made them feel they were part of some drama. Everything was vague and suggestive. Okay, there are side notes. His very successes in love, even more than the marvelous voice of his little bald seducer with a nose like Punch, swept along in his train a whole procession of enamored women, both opulent and tormented. D'Annunzio had successfully revived the Byronic legend as he passed by full-breasted women, standing in his way as Boldoni would paint them, strings of pearls anchoring them to life. Princesses and actresses, great Russian ladies, and even middle-class Bordeaux housewives. They would offer themselves up to him. And there's another side note. In short, nothing is so sweet as to triumph over the resistance of a beautiful person, and that I have the ambition of conquerors who fly perpetually from victory to victory and can never prevail with themselves to put a bound to their wishes. Nothing can restrain the impetuosity of my desires. I have a heart for the whole earth, and like Alexander, I could wish for new worlds wherein to extend my amorous conquests. Okay. Oh my god, just getting through one page took almost 10 minutes. I'm never gonna beat the illiterate allegations. Let's see if I can finish. Maybe like 20 minutes of reading a day is perfectly fine for someone of my kind. Oof. Okay. The issue of the day. The issue of the day was the ownership of the city of Fiume, just across the border in neighboring Yugoslavia. Many Italians believed that Italy's reward for siding with the Allies in the recent war should be the annexation of Fiume. D'Annunzio championed this cause and because of his status as a war hero, the army was ready to side with him, although the government opposed any action. In September of 1919, with soldiers rallying around him, D'Annunzio led his infamous march on Fiume. When Italian generals stopped him along the way and threatened to shoot him, D'Annunzio opened his coat to show his medals and said in his magnetic voice, "If you must kill me, fire first on this." The general stood there stunned, then broke into tears. He joined up with D'Annunzio. When D'Annunzio entered Fiume, he was greeted as a liberator. The next day, he was declared leader of the Free State of Fiume. Soon he was giving daily speeches from a balcony overlooking the town's main square, holding tens of thousands of people spellbound without benefit of loudspeakers. He initiated all kinds of celebrations and rituals, harking back to the Roman Empire. The citizens of Fiume began to imitate him, particularly his sexual exploits. The city became like a giant bordello. His popularity was so high that the Italian government feared a march on Rome, which at that point, had D'Annunzio decided to do it, and he had the support of a large part of the military, might actually have succeeded. D'Annunzio could have beaten Mussolini to the punch and changed the course of history. He was not a fascist, but a kind of aesthetic socialist. Not an aesthetic socialist. He decided to stay in Fiume, however, and ruled there for 16 months before the Italian government finally bombed him out of the city. Boo. Okay, side note. Among the many modes of handling Don Juan's effect on women, the motif of the irresistible hero is worth singling out, for it illustrates a curious change in our sensibility. Don Juan did not become irresistible to women until the Romantic Age, and I am disposed to think that this is a trait of the female imagination to make him so. When the female voice began to assert itself and even perhaps to dominate in literature, Don Juan evolved to become the woman's rather than the man's ideal. Don Juan is now the woman's dream of the perfect lover, fugitive, passionate, daring. He gives her the one unforgettable moment, the magnificent exaltation of the flesh, which is too often denied her by the real husband, who thinks that men are gross and women spiritual. To be the fatal Don Juan might be the dream of a few men, but to meet him is the dream of many women. Seduction is a psychological process that transcends gender, except in a few key areas where each gender has its own weakness. The male is traditionally vulnerable to the visual. The siren who can concoct the right physical appearance will seduce in large numbers. For women, the weakness is language and words, as was written by one of D'Annunzio's victims, the French actress Simone. How can one explain his conquests except by his extraordinary verbal power and the musical timbre of his voice put to the service of exceptional eloquence? For my sex is susceptible to words, bewitched by them, longing to be dominated by them. The rake is as promiscuous with words as he is with women. He chooses words for their ability to suggest, insinuate, hypnotize, elevate, infect. The words of the rake are the equivalent of the bodily adornment of the siren, a powerful sensual distraction, a narcotic. Whew. The rake's use of language is demonic because it is designed not to communicate or convey information, but to persuade, flatter, stir emotional turmoil, much as the serpent in the Garden of Eden used words to lead Eve into temptation. Interesting. The rake's use of language is demonic because it is designed not to communicate or convey information, but to persuade, flatter, stir emotional turmoil. Interesting. The example of D'Annunzio reveals the link between the erotic rake who seduces women and the political rake who seduces masses. Both depend on words. Charisma. Both depend on words. Adapt the character of the rake and you will find that the use of words as a subtle poison has infinite applications. Remember, it is the form that matters, not the context. The less your targets focus on what you say and the more on how it makes them feel, the more seductive your effect. Give your words a lofty, spiritual, literary flavor, the better to insinuate desire in your unwitting victims. Little quote moment. But what is in this force, then, by which Don Juan seduces? It is desire, the energy of sensuous desire. He desires in every woman the whole of womanhood. The reaction to this gigantic passion beautifies and develops the one desired who flushes in enhanced beauty by his reflection. As the enthusiast's fire with seductive splendor illuminates even those who stand in a casual relation to him, so Don Juan transfigures in a far deeper sense every girl. Alright, that's it for me. I literally cannot read anymore. We are now at page 24. Next section is keys to the character. Thank you, y'all.